Okay, I will be recording this meeting so that we can post it. Anyone who was not able to attend can know what we talked about, because we're going to be talking about a few important things tonight. Thank you all for coming. I'm Antonia. I'm the PTA president. And it looks like we have a lot of people on tonight, so that is great. I am going to share my screen with you so you can see my slideshow presentation. And I always forget how to do this. Hold on. Figure it out. It's the one thing I didn't do. There we go. Okay. Every time. All right. Welcome everybody to the general meeting. So on our agenda tonight, I'll do a few updates. And then tonight we're going to talk a lot about some of the PTA positions that we need filled for next school year. We have a couple that are required for us to have. And so I'd like to start now getting interest for those positions so that people can come on a little bit early if they want and kind of learn from the people who are in those positions now. And then we'll have a presentation from Reform PPS Funding, and they'll have they have their own slideshow and a video, and they will take questions at the end. So that's kind of what we're going to do today. First, some updates. So we are going to have the native plant sale. Woo! Saturday, April 2nd, 9 to 12 behind Grout. And you can sign up on Constella to volunteer, either to pick up plants the day before or to help the day of. Or you can just email groutpta@gmail.com and I can get you hooked up with Erica also if you just want to do that. The other thing is that we have a dine out at Gladstone Pizza, April 3rd and 4th. And just to kind of give them enough time to be able to do all the pizzas and everything, they're asking that we split up, if your last name is like A through M, to do it on the 3rd and N through Z on the 4th. So you can kind of split it up a little bit. Obviously, if that doesn't work for you, just do it the other day. It'll be okay. But we would like to spread it out a little bit for them. We are hoping to have some sort of ice cream social in May. So look for that soon, information. And then if anyone is interested in helping with teacher appreciation in May or 5th grade graduation ideas, those are two things that are coming up. And so if you have ideas or you want to help with either of those things, you are welcome to email us at groutpta@gmail.com. We will take all the ideas and help we can get. We also need to approve the minutes from the last general meeting. So if anyone, I can't see everyone because I'm doing presentation, so you can take yourself off mute, but does anyone have any questions or concerns about anything in the minutes from last general meeting? Okay, can I have someone move to approve the minutes from the last meeting? One of the PTA members.
I so move.
Thank you, Charisse. Can someone second?
I second. This is Erica.
Thank you, Erica. All those in favor, if you could do your little thumbs up sign that you have, either a regular thumbs up or the little guy, is fine. Great. Thank you all. I can see you. Perfect. Those pass. Great. Okay. Those are the big things coming up and what's going on. So PTA, we are here to help parents, guardians, students, teachers, everyone connect and collaborate to improve the Grout School through community events, through some of our committees that we have, like the IDEA committee. And we also do that through helping to support the teachers through some monies that we give them every year. We also want to really try and amplify voices and involve the Grout community. It's been really difficult this year, obviously, because we've been online. But as we move into next year and we're able to do more things in person, we're really wanting to expand that and make sure that we're doing some events to help people connect in person in the community. So that's what we're here for. We really would like more people to join the PTA, more people that we have, the easier it is for us to do events because, you know, many hands make light work. You can meet some new friends. You'll be in the know a lot more about what's going on at the school. So we'd love you to join, whether that's just coming to the meetings and participating that way, or if you see something tonight that interests you, or if you just have an idea off the cuff, you can always email us at Grout PTA, and if you're interested in it, we're interested in it. So this is the board this year. So we have quite a few different positions, and several of these are going to be need to be filled for next year. So the first one we'll talk about is the secretary. Brianna, did you want to talk about that at all? Or
sure, yeah. So I'm the PTA secretary this year, and it's a fun position. It's not too demanding. Monthly commitment of 2 to 3 hours, attending the meetings and taking notes during the meetings. I really enjoyed it because get to know other parents, get to know what's happening at Grout and in the community, and yeah, it's been a fun role. So if anyone's interested, let us know.
Yeah, and as the slide says, this is a required position that we have. President, secretary, and treasurer are the 3 required positions that we have to have filled to be part of Oregon PTA. So it's as Brianna said, it's more of a light role, which is a good way for people to kind of dip their toe into the PTA. So if you can at least come to board meetings and type up some notes for us, then we would love to have you. And Brianna had a second role this year, which you can do as secretary, or you don't have to, and we'll come to that in a little bit. And then
I was like, wait, Teacher Sharice is on the hospital. And I realized.
Oops, what happened?
okay, so the next position is treasurer, and that's also a required position. And I can't see everyone, so I don't know if Elizabeth is on right now. Okay, maybe. No. All right. So treasurer is definitely a more involved position than the secretary position. You do need to attend the monthly board meetings. A lot of it is keeping track of all the records of transactions that we have into and out of our accounts. Monthly bookkeeping and writing checks is a big one. Also, you'd work with the president, me, and whoever else wants to help to amend and present the yearly budget. So it is more of a time commitment, but if you're interested in numbers, then we would love to have you. I guess I should ask if there's any questions about the secretary or treasurer positions at this time. Feel free to just shout out because I can't see all of you. I also can't see the chat, so if anyone sees anything in the chat, or if you want to put it in the chat, someone will let me know, I'm sure. Another position that isn't a full position right now, we have Kathy Kershaw. She's our amazing communications chair, but she would like to start kind of moving out of that position. Kathy, are you on the call? I can't see everybody. I'm going through the list. No. Okay, so Kathy, oh, sorry, let's go back. Kathy's looking for someone to help right now. And that person we're hoping would be interested in taking it over more and more throughout this year and really take it over next year. But helping to create flyers, sorry, I misspoke. Starting to help her next year even, and kind of over the next year, school year, taking on more and more, so that by the end of the year, you would be the communications kind of chair going into 20, where are we? We're at 22, 23, 24, 25 or something. So really just help creating flyers and posters and social media posts for events, posting on our Constella and Facebook. And then right now we're just maintaining our website, but if someone was really interested in helping make it better, that would be great too. We just have kind of let it be because Kathy has not had a lot of time to do that with everything else. So if you're interested in helping with flyers and posters and social media posts and things like that, then be interested in, then feel free to communicate with us. Okay. Sorry, I'm just, okay. The next one is the garden club chair. So Erica, do you want to talk about this position?
Sure. So the garden club chair, either we need a new chair or we can do a similar thing to what we're talking about with the communications where someone can work with me over next year. But the idea being where the garden person is one who is the liaison between Grout Portland, who provides the garden education through the school. And so they work with all the classrooms. And the big thing there is checking in if they need things. So an example this year is the canopy was really falling apart. So we worked with the PTA board to make sure we could get a new one that worked better and didn't fly away in the wind. So those are little things. And then also just making sure that we get to the treasurer, the invoices, and that those get paid in a timely manner, that kind of thing. And then the other is more like community building things. There's 2 garden work parties. One is in the spring, usually at the end of April around that time. And then the other is part of Community Care Day before we open the school in the fall. And so just having someone who can help guide the work in the garden component of things for that Community Care Day. And then summer watering. So we set up a watering schedule on Constella, and then just making sure that that's actually being done and people are showing up and doing the watering throughout the summer. So it doesn't mean that you have to be there all the time or anything. I mean, that's really, it's more about recruiting volunteers. And then as Antonia mentioned, we're going to bring our native plant sale back this year. So this is a little bit more work, and it's a spring component. It's a fundraiser. It's really meant to be kind of a community building component as well. I feel like, you know, it allows a lot of people to get involved in helping make it happen, but also over the course of the day. So I would say the monthly commitment, you know, it's lower in the fall and winter, and then picks up a lot more in the spring around both the work parties and the summer watering and the plant sale component. So it's anywhere from 2 to 10 hours. That would be a good guesstimate. But again, if somebody is interested in taking this on like over time, I'd be happy to work with someone next year too to help them take it on. I'm just, I know that my kid's getting older, so I would love to have somebody getting more involved.
Great. Any questions for Erica about the garden club chair position? Okay, cool. So the other position that Brianna was also doing was the dine out chair. Brianna, do you want to talk about that? Sure.
Yeah. I think most people on here are probably familiar with the dine outs that we have been doing throughout the year. It's a great way of fundraising for the school. we partner with local restaurants and businesses, and they will donate anywhere from 10 to 20% of sales from a given night to the school, to the PTA. So what the Dine Out Chair does is contact the restaurants, and we have a spreadsheet of, from this year and last year, which businesses we've been able to partner with, which ones we've contacted. And so it's pretty organized. It's a matter of emailing and phone calls to businesses, and then just follow-up emails to get it coordinated. It's also a pretty low hour commitment. And if it's something that, if somebody's interested, they could shadow me for a while and then take over at some point. But it's been a really good program for the school, and we want to continue with it. So if anyone's interested, please let us know.
Thanks, Brianna. Any questions about the Dine Out Chair position? Again, like Brianna said, it can be lower time commitment. It's just kind of up to you how much you want to get out there and talk to people and try and get new places, new businesses. Okay, some other committees that could use probably help. We'll see as we move forward with this school year and into the summer what we're able to do next fall, but we would really love to get another fall festival happening next fall if that's possible. It's a large commitment in August, late August, and then until the date of the festival, and then there's obviously not a lot going on. So if anyone would be interested in that, if that's something we can do next year, feel free to email me at groutpta@gmail.com. And then this year, we're really starting to look at revamping how the PTA does fundraising. We have decided to discontinue the auction, and so we're trying to figure out ways for us to fundraise. And then also, once we fundraise, how are we distributing those funds and where are they going? And so right now, Trina is putting together kind of a granting process that we'll use, and we're going to be working on that process over the summer, and so that by kind of next fall we'll have a good process that we can share out and get ideas for funding projects around the school, and helping teachers with bigger projects and things like that. So we could definitely use help with that over the summer, kind of fleshing out the details of what that granting process will look like, and then also how we're going to fundraise to be able to give grants to teachers and staff and things like that. So if you're interested in that, also you can email me at groutpta@gmail.com. Anybody have any questions so far about any of the positions or things that we're looking to fill? Okay. If you do ever have a question or you think of something, feel free to email me at groutpta@gmail.com. Or, if you see me at school, I'm happy to talk to anybody. And we definitely would like to get some more people interested and involved in the PTA. So we'll probably be changing the night of the meetings because it's the same night as the PPS board meeting. And so that's up for discussion. So if you come and be part of the PTA before the end of this school year, then we can probably figure out, you can help us figure out when to have our meetings next year. That will help you too, help fit your schedule. All right, I'm going to stop sharing because our next part of the agenda is we're going to have a presentation from Reform PPS Funding. So I don't know which one of you want to share your screen. I don't know if I need to do anything. Megan, okay.
Yeah, I'll see if I can start it.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. That didn't work. Okay, there we go.
Well, actually, I'm gonna start us off. I don't know, can you guys see me? I'm just seeing Megan.
Yeah, I can see you.
Oh, okay, great. I'm a member of the Reform PPS Funding Group. My name is Suzanne Clark. We want to thank you so much for inviting us to have a conversation with your PTA this evening. We'd really like it to be an informal discussion, but we do have a presentation which we'll try to get through quickly. There's a lot to talk about, but folks should feel free to pose questions in the chat or just interrupt us and ask us questions as we go through these slides. But we'll just start off by introducing the members of our group that are able to attend tonight and are presenting. Again, my name is Suzanne Clark, and I'm a parent with an 8th grader at Ockley Green Middle School.
And I'm Megan Murmis. I have a 5th grader at Laurelhurst.
Hi, I'm Susan Carson, and I have a 7th grader at Roseway Heights Middle School.
I'm Karen Liao. I am one of the founders of Abernathy Conversations About Race when my kids were going there, and I have a 6th grader at Hosford and a 9th grader at Cleveland, and I am also a proud Grout teacher.
So our group started, the Reform PPS Funding Group started in the fall of 2020 with the sole goal of educating PPS stakeholders on the PPS Foundation system. So for example, how funds are raised and spent, as well as the outcomes of that spending. We have not focused at all on other parent fundraising mechanisms because frankly, the data on other fundraising such as PTAs and how those funds are spent is incredibly difficult to get your hands on. That data is not maintained or tracked by PPS and is difficult to request. But more importantly, we feel that teachers are arguably the most essential cost in our schools. They can't be compared to the price of a field trip or a soccer team's uniform. And foundations are the only mechanism for parents to buy teachers at their schools. So to make it simple, PTAs can fund things and stuff, and foundations fund people, bodies in the school. So 2 years ago when our group formed, many, if not most community members were not even aware that foundations and the foundation system existed. Few people understood how it worked. And unfortunately, that's remains true today, although we're working hard to change that. We hope that your PTA can help us bring previously silent voices on this topic to the table. And that's a table at which conversation has historically been dominated by those who benefit the most from the foundation system. And as for the Reform PPS Funding Group, our members have fluctuated over the years. We typically have 8 to 10 people working diligently on engagement and outreach. We're always adding people to our group, so feel free to reach out if you're interested in helping. We have been, as I mentioned, engaging with PTAs and foundation leaders for almost 2 years now. And back in May 2021, we sent a letter to the PPS board requesting that it reform foundation policy, or at least begin the discussion on reform. And that letter was signed by 53 PTA and foundation board members from schools all across the district, from schools that have strong foundations and schools that have never had foundations. So to kick off this presentation on a very complicated subject, we're going to show you a quick 3-minute video that we put together, which explains the foundation system and its impact on our community. Oh, Megan, I'm not hearing audio.
Okay. Well, I'm not sure how to solve that.
This is always tricky. I'm wondering if we should, if I post a link in the chat for Antonia. to
Yeah,
present.
actually, and then I can also try and just do it through the YouTube page. So let me just stop sharing really quickly and I will share a different screen. So let's see if this works.
No.
No?
Still
Okay.
not doing it. I'm not sure. I know I had the link before too. Okay, let me see if I can share it and we can watch it that way or not and see if that helps. I don't know if it helps who is doing it. Let's see here. Sorry. Here we go. Just pushing the wrong button. Can you hear that? No. Okay. I don't know how to make that work. Does anyone have any ideas or no? I don't know how Zoom works.
Technology.
I know.
I've heard there's some kind of share sound video sound button somewhere when you're trying to share a video.
Yeah.
Not
Really?
that I've done it. I've just heard people talk about it when the sound hasn't been working on presentations.
Yeah, I'm just not seeing the setting anywhere that would let me change it.
Mhm.
Well, that's a bummer because it's so
So if you-
good. So maybe folks can go to that video afterwards. Essentially, it describes the foundation system and how we. Oh, someone.
No, I'm just putting the presentation back up.
Okay.
Does it give you an option when you, it says select share sound in the bottom left corner of the share selection window.
Oh.
Is there a share sound option? somewhere?
Haha. Yes, there is. Let's try this.
Yay.
All right, cool.
Oregon schools have
Yay.
been chronically underfunded for over 20 years.
That worked. Good job,
Ballot measures
Brianna.
5 and 50, passed in the 1990s, shifted the main source of public school funding from local property taxes to the Oregon State General Fund. But the General Fund doesn't have a dedicated pool of money to fully fund education. The solution? An amendment to the Oregon Constitution that allows legislators to either fully fund schools or to write a report explaining why they didn't. Our legislators, year after year, opt to write the report instead of fully funding our schools. In response, PPS allowed individual schools to set up foundations to raise money to buy teachers. But not all schools have foundations or the ability to raise enough money to buy additional teachers. In fact, the schools that raise the most money serve mostly white, wealthier communities, with an average Black student population of less than 2%. By comparison, Black students make up almost 9% of the PPS student population. And schools with the highest percentage of Black and historically underserved students don't have school foundations and have never been able to buy teachers, while top fundraising schools buy teachers year after year. The result is that school foundation fundraising is racially inequitable. But don't school foundations raise money for all schools? PPS requires that school foundations contribute to a central fund that distributes grants to schools that need them. But even this system helps perpetuate racially inequitable funding. Here's how it works. Imagine a school foundation raises $220,000. School foundations keep the first $10,000, plus 2/3 of additional money raised, in this case, a total of $150,000. The remaining 1/3, $70,000, goes to the PPS Parent Fund, which makes grants to schools based on need. But PPS Parent Fund grants, which typically range from $12,000 to $50,000, are rarely used to pay for any additional staffing, while a very small number of high fundraising schools raise hundreds of thousands of dollars, enough to hire multiple teachers and aides. Which explains how we end up with a racially inequitable model of school funding that benefits wealthier, whiter schools, while underfunding schools that serve the majority of Black students and other historically underserved communities. It's time for foundation funds to be shared equitably across the district. Here are some ways that you can advocate for that change. Start by visiting our website, where you'll be able to get informed and understand how foundation funds are allocated across the district. Make a pledge to avoid contributions that pay for teachers in individual schools. Call on the PPS board to immediately end inequitable foundation fundraising. And share your ideas for fully funding staff and teaching positions at all PPS schools. We all want what's best for our kids. If we truly believe in an equitable system, we need to stop relying on donations to individual school foundations. We must demand that all schools are properly funded so that all kids get the education they both need and deserve.
So at Grout, we have never had a school foundation, but we do receive an annual Parent Fund Award because of our high number of historically underserved students, and at least 15% of our students are eligible for free meals. This chart presents the awards that Grout has received since 2015. And as you can see, the award amounts are not predictable. It's important to note that a teacher or one FTE costs approximately $80,000 to fund. So many schools like ours that are award recipients typically spend these funds on programs or supplies because they can't cover a teacher. And here is a visual comparison of the Grout, the funds that Grout gets from the parent fund to what our neighboring school Abernathy gets from their foundation fundraising, sorry. And here it is in chart form. And you can see in the, at the bottom, the total amount of money that has been awarded to Grout since 2015 is $146,000 compared to the funds kept by Abernathy.
In the 2018-19 school year, Abernathy ranked 5th in foundation funds spent on FTE. This graph here shows the percentage of Black students enrolled in the top fundraising schools, which ranged from 0.4% to 2.6%. In contrast, the average Black student population at schools that received Parent Fund Awards was 13.6%, and the average Parent Fund Award was $30,000. This chart shows how Grout's Parent Fund Awards compare to average foundation funds kept by top fundraising elementary schools since 2017. So as you look across the graph, across the years, you can see in 2018 to 19, Grout received no Parent Fund Award, while the foundations maintained their fundraising levels in that same year. And here's a more detailed comparison of the funds raised by foundations to buy FTE as compared to Grout's Parent Fund Award allocations. So Grout is shown in the teal color. It shows that there's little continuity of these allocations. And this is because foundations can have a good year or bad years, and because PPS also adjusts its formula for distributing the Parent Fund Awards year by year.
This is a crazy detailed document produced by the PPS administration. They refer to it as a budget heat map. And I realize the writing is so small that you can't really read it. But the story that I'll talk to you about that's behind it in coordination with the color coding will say a lot. And Megan, if you hit the L button, you might be able to use a laser pointer and help walk people through the columns. Yep, that I'm talking about. So cool. So the first columns on the left represent the percentage of kids on free and reduced meals, green being a low percentage on free and reduced, and orange a high percentage. And we've indicated where Grout falls in the scheme of things, where the red arrow line points to. The second set of columns represents academic achievement and the percentage of students whose reading and math levels are at level 3 or 4. Blue is a high percentage of achieving students, and red is a lower percentage of students achieving a level 3 or higher in reading and math. The next two columns, which are like red and yellow and green, represent the number of students per FTE and per student funding. These columns suggest that PPS is providing more per student funding to schools in the green areas and less to those in red. But this can be misleading because, for example, historically underserved schools such as Grout are typically staffed with newer teachers that are paid at lower FTE grade levels. And in addition, and perhaps more importantly, the students that attend the schools that receive lower per student funding come to school highly resourced and supported in numerous ways. So PPS per student funding is allocated in an effort to close achievement gaps and opportunity gaps. And the next point I'm going to make will tie this all in. If you look at the final columns on the far right that are mostly white with some blue, these columns identify FTE allocated by foundation fundraising, the first column, and then FTE purchased by parent fund awards, schools that receive the parent fund awards. The FTE awarded in the left column, as I mentioned, are generated by foundations, with blue indicating a higher number of FTE purchased. And the FTE generated by parent fund awards, which are in the middle column, and they're all below 0.5 FTE. It's very little FTE. And as you can see, there aren't that many schools that are able to use parent fund awards to purchase FTE. Interestingly, the highest FTE funded this particular year by a parent fund award was Grout's, which was 0.44 of an FTE. But I really want to point out that this was one of the highest fundraising years for PPS. It's second highest fundraising years of all time. And I should also mention that one of the biggest arguments made against reforming the PPS foundation policy is that schools with strong foundations have lower per student funding than schools without foundations. However, it's important to understand that PPS has repeatedly stated that it allocates school budgets based on need and in line with its goal of closing significant achievement gaps, which again, you can see in the far left columns where there's all that red in contrast to the blue above. PPS has also stated that it does not give less money to schools in anticipation of those schools being able to raise foundation funds. So therefore, this means that the FTE paid for by foundations is above and beyond what PPS has determined as equitable funding.
So as Suzanne mentioned at the start, about almost a year ago, we reached out to the board and requested that they put foundation reform on their agenda, which they did. But it's been a bit of a rocky road. We have some supporters on the board of reforming the foundation policy, but there are also some people who don't want to do that or who want to lump that into a bigger discussion about all fundraising across the district. Which we see as problematic because at the moment, the thing that is under the direct control of the Board of Education is foundation fundraising policy. It's something that they have direct oversight of, whereas with PTAs and other fundraising mechanisms, they don't have that kind of oversight at the moment. And while there is a bigger conversation to be had about how all fundraising happens across the district, it's not the thing that they can do something about tomorrow if they wanted to. So we've been watching the conversation evolve over time, and we are trying to help push that conversation forward. And one of the things that the board has said that they want to hear is from communities that are recipients of the Parent Fund Award grants. And that's a voice that's been lacking in the conversation, at least in the public board meetings and policy committee meetings. So one of the things that we are trying to help do is reach out to schools that do get these kind of grants and ask them if they would be willing to testify before the Board of Education or in front of the policy committee. So if you are interested in testifying, we would be more than happy to help you sign up to give that testimony. We can also, if you want help, talk you through the different kinds of talking points, walk you through some of the history of what's happened before, any kind of help that you would want in order to give that kind of testimony before the board. And also, if you know of anyone else that might be interested in giving that kind of testimony, it'd be great if you could reach out to them and either point them towards signing up to give testimony or point them towards us, because like I said, we would be more than willing to help push that conversation forward.
So that's it for our presentation. We can now, Antonia, open it up to Q&A if anyone has any questions. And if we can't answer questions because we don't have our better data heads here at this meeting, a lot of the people who crunched the data and put these charts together, we're happy to take questions back to our group and get back to you guys as soon as possible.
Okay, great. I'll start with the first question. Have you as a group come up with any ideas about how you would want to reform the policy, or are you right now just trying to get the board to just look at reforming the policy?
We did. We actually submitted 2 draft policy reforms, and those were specific, again, to foundation policy, not any broader parent fundraising policy. And the only reason we did that was at the direct request of 2 board members who intimated that the only way this was going to get on the agenda is if we put forth a policy suggestion. So we made an initial policy reform suggestion of don't allow parents to buy FTE, period, across the board. All FTE should be funded by public funds. That didn't fly. So we made another suggestion, which was to have a single, like many districts across the country do, school districts, have one single foundation that all schools contribute to, and the PPS administration in that case would determine how those funds are spent. And then I should just mention that there has been a third policy reform proposed by, that was worked on by Policy Committee Chair Julia Brim Edwards and PPS Chief of Staff Jonathan Garcia, which at the request of several PPS board members encompasses all parent fundraising and aims to reform all of that. And I posted in the chat a link to policy committee agendas and links to meeting recordings where a lot of that information can be reviewed, the proposed policies.
And I would just add that, you know, while we do, like Suzanne mentioned, we did have some initial ideas about this. I don't think it's up to us to come up with all of the answers for this, and especially, you know, our group, which is why we're having conversations like these, is that this isn't just about us, it's about the entire district, and they need to hear from the entire district. And so, like Suzanne said, one of the ways that we could approach this is by having a district-wide foundation. But there might be other ideas out there that would be better, or tweaking one of the ideas that's been put out there before. And so what we came to this not having the answers, what we wanted to do was make sure everyone understood the issue and had a voice in moving forward and making sure that basically what we know is that this is not an equitable system, and we want the entire district to come together to try and fix this.
This is Karen. I just want to share a little of my personal experience as a parent at Abernathy and as a teacher at Grout. I've been able to see inside these two schools, and I want to be very clear that I don't see it as an achievement gap. It's an opportunity gap. And because of the amount of money that Abernathy is able to raise, they can lower their class sizes and they can provide more for their students. And that's not right. For those of you who know me, you know that I was very unhappy with my experience for my two children at Abernathy. And if I could do it again, I would have pulled them out and tried to put them in Grout. Grout has a lot of wonderful things that I don't see at Abernathy, including a very caring community, caring, supportive community. But I want our students to have all the opportunities that they deserve.
Thanks, Karen. Did anyone have any other questions? I know one of the questions that a board member had was, how does Grout get the money, and then how is it spent? It sounds like mostly it's not on FTE, but Denise, do you want to talk at all about the monies that we get from the parent fund and how it does or doesn't help Grout?
And I didn't prepare anything, so I'm just off the top of my head trying to give out some information. I haven't, and those numbers matched what I was thinking about as I was driving home. We haven't spent this money for the last few years, so we're rolling it into next year, and the PPS parent fund has allowed us to continue to roll it in. And the wonderful thing about the funds for me is that there's a lot of flexibility in spending. When I look at title funding, there's a lot of restrictions around how that can be spent and what it can be applied towards. And that equity is in terms of FTE when we get that funding. And they kind of commingle all of these things together. What it did for us for next year, when I looked at staffing, there's a certain pool of money that we set aside for professional development for some of our leadership teams and other collaborative work. What I did for next year is I saved that parent fund for those things, and I was able to spend much more of my title dollars on FTE. So I didn't directly spend any of the parent funds on FTE, but I probably would not have. We added next year, and we were it was from title and a third EA that we haven't had for the last 2 years, I believe. And that came out of title dollars from the district, but I had to bump it up with our title dollars. And I would not have been able to do that if I didn't have the money from the parent fund sitting there to kind of backfill. It would have taken my title dollars down too low. I don't know if that makes sense, but it basically is able for me to take my title dollars and spend that on FTE and save the parent funds for that collaborative work, for some of the professional development that we're hoping to do next year. So that's kind of what we're planning to do with it, just real broadly speaking. Hopefully that answered your question.
Thanks, Denise.
If I can just comment on that briefly, what Denise explained is not uncommon scenario for schools that receive parent fund awards. You know, a $10,000 award or $20,000 award is not enough to apply to FTE. And so principals will sometimes sit on that until there is enough to sufficiently fund a part-time EA for kindergarten. And as Denise mentioned, foundation parent awards can be spent on anything. It's the principal's objective or authority to use those funds in any way they want to, whereas Title I funds do have restrictions on them. You know, we have, although the data is not very publicly available, there are only 2 years of publicly available data from PPS on how parent fund awards have been spent by schools. The vast majority spend that money on programs, sometimes student monitoring systems, disciplinary systems, equity disciplinary systems, rather than FTE. But something I was thinking about as Denise was talking is, you know, having to save up and not spend those funds year after year, while you have a very small number of schools that are spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on FTE year after year. And therein lies the inequity, particularly when you look at the racial makeup of the communities, and how that circles back to this being an issue regarding race and privilege as well, that we should not lose as part of the discussion.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. Any other questions? Go ahead, Ryan.
Yeah, I have a question. So I think, first of all, I just want to say I totally buy the argument that this funding is that's contributing to inequities rather than solving them, and that the data that you guys provided was super helpful. I must say, I would also love to see this broken down by actual class rather than just race. I think that's important, but it's obviously not the only way that inequities exist in our education system and society more broadly. Having said that, and I want also to say that I appreciate the goal of the group to not try to determine the policy alternative, and want to have a sort of broad consultation before, I guess, like that was your initial goal, broad consultation prior to putting together sort of an alternative into place, or to propose an alternative. But it sounds like your hands were pushed, or you were pushing it and need to do so. That said, one more area I have is that an oppositional position creates a vacuum for just making things worse. Okay, so right. So I'm totally sympathetic to your argument in principle, but that the question is like, what's the alternative, and is it better than the current one? So, you know, as Denise just outlined, Grout as a Title I school, which in all the kind of math and reading scores that you already showed demonstrates that it can use additional funding, and to the extent that we get some currently from the parent fund, that's useful. But if the outcome is to strip that funding away without putting something positive in place, you know, theoretically, right, it could lead to everyone being worse off with no one being better off, right? And so, especially with the group that you're trying to target and improve. So I guess, so the counter, I think, to the kind of goal of collaborating broadly, which I guess these are not necessarily mutually exclusive, but is the need to put a positive vision in place that actually shows improvement over the current system rather than simply objection to the current system, which could obviously leave, I mean, including the people that you've already mentioned. I'm sure that the idea of trying to, I assume part of that's actually just to poison the well to try to get people to oppose this proposal. But the alternative that was put together by those other board members, but in any case, is to, you know, is to put something positive in its place that people can rally behind and see how it actually will benefit the groups that you're trying to. So anyway, that's just my and I guess I would say is, like, to the extent that you guys you've now had these consultations, or you've reached out to groups like ours and others, of course, before us, you know, like, what are you hearing? Like, is there something being formulated that do you like, for instance, going forward this with like the single fund, or are there alternatives that you are considering perhaps pushing forward as something that people could rally behind?
It's a wonderful question you ask, Ryan, one that we've received multiple times. And as a result of getting that question a lot, we created a link on our website where people can sign up to join in that second conversation, and start that second conversation of, well, yes, I mean, let me take a step back and address the optimism or the positiveness in all of this. I don't see educating a community and all the stakeholders on an inequitable policy as negative. But you also mentioned the important fact of, well, what happens when reform changes? And I think that should be part of the reform discussion, and the reform for the inequitable policy that has, by the way, been in place since 1996. How we shape the new policy is where that discussion comes into being. Frankly, people weren't ready to have that conversation until this was proposed and being brought to the table, to the board of directors, the PPS board. So I really don't mean to avoid your question, but our response to that question has been, you're right, let's do this. There's a link on our website that I think it's Unite or something, where you can sign up to start a group, to be part of a group of other people that want to figure this out.
I would also say that another part of the conversations that we've been having is trying to shift the focus, is trying to encourage people to think about the community that's created around fundraising as not the healthiest way to create community, and say that the reason we want to create community is to support each other and not to raise money necessarily. And I realize that sounds kind of like a cop-out because the money is necessary. But in addition to that, I would say, for example, the move to a district-wide foundation, and I'm probably going to get my numbers wrong here, so someone else jump in if I get it wrong. But if we were to move to something like a district-wide foundation, the amount of money that would need to be raised would be so much less to sustain the grants that communities like Grout are already getting, that we don't think it would be that hard to replace them. So even if we take away the ability for these high fundraising schools to raise money, and therefore they wouldn't be putting as much money into the pot, it is completely reasonable to expect that the district as a whole, I think it was something like $1 million a year or something like that, that we would need to raise as a district, would be able to sustain those existing grants. So, that's just one of the ways in which we've been thinking about this. And that's not to say that that is the answer, but because PPS does have this fundraising arm and has the parent fund and the fund for PPS, it's the thing that they might be most open to, because but the only counter to that is I would say that you're still relying on fundraising and private donations, which, as you've seen in the charts and as everyone knows, fluctuates year over year, especially when something like a pandemic hits. And so in addition to there being these great disparities between the types of schools, you also just see these giant fluctuations year over year. And so it's not something that we can always count on. So I know that's not exactly an answer to what you're talking about, but it's some of the ways in which we've been thinking about it.
Yeah, no, that's super helpful though, through just noting how small the amounts really do have to be at the aggregate level to sustain the level of current funding for schools who are under-resourced or need additional resources. Yeah, that's helpful. Thanks.
Hi, I'm wondering if I could just make a comment in regards to Ryan's question or comment. I'm currently a Grout parent, but I was formerly an Abernathy parent. And what I saw at Abernathy was that the response by the school one year when the class, the teacher assignments were given out, and the administrators, figure out what their staffing will be. The response one year when that came out was we need more FTE than what we were allotted. So they went even beyond what they had planned to fundraise for that year based on that. And that was their response to the problem of understaffing, was to concentrate on their own school. And what I think, I'm hoping that if this reform does happen, that schools that do have the ability to fundraise to that capacity will turn their attentions and their energies towards holistically improving the district for everyone, so that the class sizes across the district improve, instead of having a very localized solution, which is let's fundraise an additional 0.5 or 0.75 FTE. And that discussion at that individual school was very contentious. It brought out a lot of parents, and it brought out a lot of conflict too that was unhealthy for the community, because there were a lot of people who felt like, how far are we going to fundraise for? This is not what we agreed to. So I just wanted to add that perspective, that maybe I totally hear what you're saying, that it's better, that sometimes it's better to have a positive alternative in place. But I'm hoping that the positive alternative is that people will turn their attentions to the whole district.
Thank you so much for that comment, because it reminds me about the advocacy element that parents have as part. It's like our social contract. I mean, these are public schools. These are not private schools. But what the foundation system has essentially turned some of our schools into are quasi-public schools, where parents can reduce class sizes if they're able to cut the check. And, you know, auctions are not easy to put on. They take a lot of time and energy. And after all that's said and done, there's not much left for advocacy work. And unfortunately, I think we can all agree that Portland Public Schools need more resources. We are not there yet. And instead of fundraising in independent silos, parents need to be role models for their children and advocate for public funding, adequate public funding at both the local and the state level. You know, civics hasn't been taught in Portland Public Schools for a long time, and they're trying to bring it back. And it's parents' responsibility to demonstrate that for their children, that they do have a voice. And we're, you know, in some regards, asking people who have traditionally had the strongest voice to take a step back and change direction and turn to advocacy work, which, you know, historically parent organizations have been built on, not fundraising. It's a relatively new thing since a lot of anti-tax legislation went into place in the late 1980s, early or mid 1990s.
And there was one question in the chat that was, does the board, I assume PPS board, dictate class size across the district? And how do we get board district to prioritize the issue? Which I think we kind of touched on that second part, but.
I believe that the PPS administration determines class size through its budget allocation. The board votes, engages in discussion with PPS, and I believe the board has to approve the budget. I'm not 100% certain on that. We can get back to you on that question with certainty. But as always, the best way to get the board and PPS to address any issue is to testify at a meeting. And it's so easy to do now because you can do it via Zoom.
Well, that was my question. That's what I was thinking is, yes, let's have this conversation about, I can't remember how you phrased it, but more a holistic approach to funding schools, but also not just do that, but how do we demand across the board what we want and see results in that way too, both things together.
I think asking for transparency from PPS on what are the numbers and where do our shortages lie. It seems like it should be a simple thing to answer, but to testify and ask for that information, and then also ask in conjunction with that question, is how much will that cost? And then we can get to Ryan's great question, which is, how do we do that? What is our means or mechanism as one district to get our schools fully funded?
And I just wanted to jump in about the class size and the budget. And a lot of you probably are following this, but if not, the board is currently in the process of discussing the budget. So there are a series of meetings where the district staff presents the budget and the board discusses it. And there are, there's a community budget review committee as well. But in the recent discussions, so that's another chance to have your voice heard. But in the most recent meeting, class size was a huge focus of these discussions. And it was the district's position that they're actually reducing class sizes on average across the district. And many teachers and parents countered that when you look at individual schools, and especially in the middle grades, the averages don't tell the full story. So it had me thinking of, so many schools and so many families are worried about, large class sizes, and there's just such a small percentage of those are able to address this with these types of foundation funds. So yeah, right now is the time to really weigh in on this, I think.
Thanks, Susan.
I don't know if you want me to add on about the discussion around the class sizes and how that gets decided by the district. I actually haven't been a part at the district level of that, but I can tell you how the staffing happens. We in February got our individual school reports that shows the allocations, and they base the the number of teachers or the number of sections at each grade level based on our ratio that they communicate with us and share. There's a ratio that is for non-title schools. There's a ratio for title schools that's a little bit lower. And then there's a ratio for CSI and TSI schools that's even a little bit lower than that. So the district decides, that ratio is set, and then they take our projected enrollment into the next year and use those ratios to determine how many sections are at each grade level. I don't know if that was the detail that Kim was asking in that question, but then the board hasn't approved that budget yet. I think that they do the staffing before the board approves it, but they're anticipating whatever the board's going to do for that. They're anticipating what those class size ratios are based on our projected enrollment. I don't know if that helps, but I thought I would add that since we just wrapped that process up.
And I think when you say, Denise, the ratio, does that mean that that's the cap, right? That's the high, like the cap is lower for title schools, and so.
A little bit. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, there's a range that they're looking for, and it is at the high end, right? So that's what's been happening at Grout. Our enrollment's gone down just enough at each grade level. So now we've fallen on the side of the equation where we get 2 sections instead of where we were falling on the side where we got 3. And that's been very impactful at Grout for the last few years, because I think we've lost 4 sections over the last 3 years of based on just, it's not a lot. It's, our enrollment's gone down, I would guess around 30 kids, but it's just enough at each grade level that it drops below that ratio. We do get a lower class sizes by a couple of kiddos because we're title. And because we're title, but yeah, we're still not close enough to get that 3rd section added back. Sorry, I don't want to take us on a bird walk, but if that helps to understand how it works.
Thanks, Denise. Someone did ask if there's a comprehensive resource somewhere to help the community understand the history of underfunding schools in Portland, because many people are new to Oregon and they haven't had kids here, and so they don't know the history. I don't know. Does anyone else know if there's any?
Yeah, there's a
Yes.
lot of great stuff out there that was produced leading up to the Student Success Act that passed a couple years ago, which brought more funding to our district, but not enough funding to our district. So as a follow-up, our group will send your PTA some links to that information.
That'd be great. Awesome. Okay, I know we're over time, but this has been a really great discussion, and I think that it's important for Grout, especially because we don't have a foundation and we don't fundraise enough to ever be a foundation anyway. Talking about auctions, we decided to stop doing the auction because we make so little money and it takes so much of our volunteer time that it's just not worth the time and effort. If we made $100,000, I would totally do it, but we don't. So did anyone else have any last minute questions? Also, if anyone ever has any questions about this, you could also, I assume, contact the Reform PPS funding, or you can email groutpta@gmail.com and I can send email to them. So
I just want to say thank you so much for doing this work. It's so important right now, and really, really appreciate the presentation tonight. So thank you.
Yes,
Thank
thank
you.
you. Oh, sorry. I was just gonna add too, if you ever consider having in-person meetings with I don't know, like a Southeast group or whatever groups to get more more sections on board and more planning, that would be great. And I would love to discuss with other schools and see where we're all headed. Thank you.
I popped our reform email in the chat in case anyone has any other questions or wants to reach out.
Yeah, and thank you guys for coming on such short notice. I literally emailed them within the last 7 days, so they were on top of it to come tonight, and I really appreciate it because we just found out about this last week. So yeah. All right. Well, as always, there's a lot of work out there, and many hands make light work. So if anyone's interested in helping either our PTA or the Reform PPS funding or both, you know how to get a hold of us. And we appreciate all of you for being here and for helping in the future too. So everyone have a great night and a great spring break. And we'll see you back here in a couple months, or yeah, May is the next general meeting.
Hey, Antonia, can I ask you a quick question?
Sure.
I accidentally this year scheduled my principal chats where they fall on the same day as the PTA meeting.
I noticed.
I don't think that's good, but I also don't want to make it like, I don't know. So do you have thoughts about that? I'm starting to think about next year if we continue them, which